Flanking. Flanking is one of the oldest and most fundamental tactical maneuvers in human warfare. Instead of crashing directly into the front of an enemy line, where shields face forward and heavy armor is concentrated, a force moves around the sides or rear. The goal is simple: target vulnerable points while avoiding strength. When hit from the side, soldiers cannot defend themselves without breaking formation. The psychological shock is immediate. Soldiers who thought they were advancing suddenly take fire from a direction they cannot protect. A successful flank forces defenders to split their focus, destroying command structure, triggering chaos, and turning organized units into panicked routes. Feigned retreat. Feigned retreat is a psychological trap relying on the enemy's pride and greed for victory. A force initiates an engagement, pretends to panic, and flees in apparent terror. Pursuing forces, convinced they have won, break their formation to chase down the fleeing soldiers. This is where the trap snaps shut. The retreating force leads pursuers into an ambush zone or suddenly turns around, reforming their ranks to strike the exposed, breathless attackers. It requires incredible discipline to pretend to break without losing control. William the Conqueror famously used this at Hastings, and the Mongols mastered it across Eurasia to destroy heavy knights. Pincer movement. Also known as a double envelopment, the pincer movement completely destroys an opposing force by trapping them on both flanks simultaneously. The maneuver begins with the center holding off the enemy's main push, often yielding ground to draw them deeper forward. While the enemy presses center, the army's wings surge forward around the flanks, meeting behind the enemy to close off escape. Trapped inside a shrinking pocket, encircled troops lose room to swing weapons or maneuver. Panic spreads as soldiers realize they are trapped. Hannibal executed this at the Battle of Cannae, crushing 80,000 Roman legionaries from all sides. Scorched earth. Scorched earth turns an advancing enemy's logistical supply lines into their greatest enemy. Instead of fighting direct battles, a retreating army burns its own crops, slaughters livestock, poisons wells, and destroys infrastructure. The target is not the enemy soldier's body, but their stomach and stamina. As invaders push deeper into foreign territory, they find nothing to forage, relying entirely on ever-stretching supply lines susceptible to harassment. Cold, hunger, and disease do the work of thousands of soldiers. Russia used scorched earth against Napoleon in 1812 and again in World War II to collapse invading armies from within. Siege warfare. Siege warfare is the art of starving and suffocating a fortified position into submission. When a city or castle is too well defended for direct assault, attackers surround the stronghold, blocking every road and river to cut off incoming food, water, and ammunition. Attackers settle in for a war of attrition lasting months or years. Siege engines smash walls while sappers dig tunnels beneath fortresses to collapse foundation stones. However, the true killers are famine and disease. Rations shrink, clean water runs out, and sickness sweeps through overcrowded populations, testing which side breaks first under relentless pressure. Guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare is asymmetrical fighting used by smaller forces against a dominant military power. Rather than engaging in massed battles where open firepower wins, guerrillas use terrain like mountains, jungles, or urban streets to blend in with populations. They strike fast, using ambushes, booby traps, and hit-and-run raids, then vanish before the enemy can react. The goal is to bleed the enemy through constant paper cuts. By forcing a large force to guard every road, outpost, and supply line, guerrilla tactics drain economic resources, wear down morale, and erode public support until the occupier withdraws.
Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, is a high-speed tactic aimed at paralyzing an opponent before they can organize a defense. Developed in the 20th century, it relies on speed, surprise, and mobile force integration. Instead of attacking along an entire front line, fast-moving armored divisions spearhead through a single weak point backed by air support, smashing enemy communications. Armored forces push deep into the rear, bypassing fortified positions and cutting supply lines, while infantry mops up isolated pockets. The relentless momentum moves faster than the defender's command network can react, causing total collapse in days. Defense in depth. Defense in depth absorbs and neutralizes the momentum of an overwhelming offensive strike. Rather than building a single rigid defensive wall, a commander constructs multiple layered defensive belts stretching miles backward. These belts feature minefields, trench lines, barbed wire, anti-tank ditches, and fortified strongpoints. As attackers smash through the first line, they encounter another and another, taking heavy casualties for every foot gained. Each line slows the attack, forcing the enemy to expand ammunition, fuel, and elite troops until fresh reserves launch a crushing counteroffensive against the exhausted invader. Infiltration tactics. Infiltration tactics were developed during World War I to break the bloody stalemate of trench warfare. Instead of sending waves of soldiers directly into machine gun fire, small specialized teams of stormtroopers sneak through gaps in the enemy front line under cover of fog or brief artillery bombardment. They bypass heavy strongpoints, pushing deep into enemy territory to target command posts, artillery batteries, and communication hubs. By severing the nervous system of the defense, they leave front lines isolated and confused, allowing conventional infantry to follow and clear bypassed positions with minimal resistance.
Fabian strategy. The Fabian strategy is named after Roman dictator Quintus Fabius Maximus. Designed to defeat a superior enemy through delay and attrition rather than direct confrontation. The practitioner avoids major battles, knowing a head-on clash results in defeat. Instead, they hover near the enemy, striking foraging parties, disrupting supply lines, and cutting off stragglers, while retreating whenever the enemy tries to force an engagement. The enemy burns through resources and loses soldiers to minor skirmishes without achieving a decisive victory, until the morale plummets and domestic support disintegrates. Choke point exploitation. Choke point exploitation uses geography to negate an enemy's numerical superiority. By taking a position in a narrow mountain pass, river crossing, or canyon, a small army forces a massive invading force to bottleneck. The vast size of the enemy army becomes useless because only a few soldiers can fight at the front line at any given moment. Defenders rotate fresh troops into the narrow opening, while the attackers' massive numbers pile up behind, trapped in a space where they cannot maneuver. Thermopylae is the classic example, where a small Greek force held off massive Persian numbers for days. Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer focuses on breaking a large, unified enemy into smaller, disconnected pieces, defeated one by one. Tactically, armored wedges drive through gaps between enemy units to sever mutual support. Politically, leaders fuel internal rivalries, ethnic tensions, or political disputes within an enemy coalition. By convincing individual factions to fight amongst themselves or sign separate peace treaties, the strategist prevents the enemy from assembling their total strength. Once separated, each smaller unit is hopelessly outnumbered and easily eliminated in isolation without ever facing the complete force at once.
Shock and awe. Shock and awe, formerly known as rapid dominance, is a modern military tactic designed to destroy an enemy's will to fight before a traditional ground battle begins. It relies on overwhelming demonstrations of power, precision technology, and massive firepower applied simultaneously across the entire depth of the enemy nation. Within hours, stealth aircraft, cruise missiles, and electronic warfare obliterate command facilities, air defense networks, power grids, and communication systems. The speed and destruction create a terrifying psychological impact, convincing enemy leadership and troops that resistance is completely futile. Phalanx formation. The phalanx was an ancient infantry tactic transforming individual warriors into a single, unstoppable machine. Heavy foot soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder in tight rectangular blocks, sometimes 8 to 16 rows deep. Large shields locked together to form a solid wall of bronze and wood, while long spears, called sarissas, projected outward like an impenetrable forest of spikes. As the phalanx advanced, the front rows stabbed forward, while rear ranks held spears angled upward to deflect incoming arrows. As long as the phalanx held formation and kept flanks protected, no frontal assault could pierce its wall. Island hopping. Island hopping was a strategic naval tactic developed during the Pacific Campaign of World War II to bypass heavily fortified enemy strongholds. Instead of wasting time, lives, and resources attacking every single island held by the enemy, commanders targeted specific strategically located islands possessing key airfields or harbors. Once captured, these bases projected air and naval power onto the next target. Bypassed fortified islands were left completely cut off from supply lines and reinforcements, surrounded by Allied air dominance. These isolated garrisons withered on the vine, rendered useless without direct ground combat.